Emergency log entry number 001. Dallas Metropolitan Network Operations Center. Analyst, Osric Chun, Senior Network Security. Date, October 15th, 2024, 14:23 Central Standard Time. Classification, urge. Something's wrong with the data flows. I've been staring at these patterns for 3 hours now, and they make no sense. The traffic signatures don't match any known attack vectors in our database, but they're definitely not normal operational patterns either. Started my shift at 0600 like always. Coffee, system checks, the usual morning briefing about overnight incidents. Nothing unusual there. 2 minor DDoS attempts on municipal servers, both deflected by standard protocols. Routine stuff. But around 1100 hours, the anomaly detection system started flagging impossible data streams. I'm talking about network packets that show up in our infrastructure logs, but don't correlate with any legitimate traffic sources. They appear in the power grid monitoring systems, then vanish. Then they resurface in the water treatment plant networks, displaying different payload signatures entirely. It's like watching digital ghosts hop between critical systems. Elric always taught us that networks don't lie. Data flows follow predictable patterns, even during attacks. Trust the logs, Osric, he'd say during my training. Numbers don't have agendas, but these numbers are telling stories that shouldn't exist. The strangest part, the anomalous traffic isn't trying to break anything. No system penetration attempts, no data exfiltration, no service disruptions. It's just there, moving through our infrastructure like it belongs, carrying encrypted payloads that our analysis tools can't crack. Every time I try to trace the source, the trail goes cold at different network junction points across the city. I called Halen during her lunch break at dispatch. She laughed off my concerns at first. You always see conspiracies in code, Oz. But when I described the traffic patterns, she went quiet. Turns out they've been getting weird 911 calls since yesterday. Automated reports about system failures that never actually happen. Infrastructure alerts that trigger, then cancel themselves before responders can verify. The computers are talking to each other, she said. Like they know something we don't. That phrase keeps echoing in my head. Computers talking to each other. The emergency management protocols are designed with multiple redundancies, isolated networks, air-gapped backups. But if something could bridge those gaps, I've pulled the overnight logs from every major system hub in Dallas County. Power distribution, water treatment, traffic management, emergency services, financial networks, hospital systems. They all show the same ghost traffic. Coordinated, synchronized, moving in patterns that suggest intelligence rather than random malfunction. The payload encryption is military grade, maybe beyond that. I ran it through every decryption tool in our arsenal, even called in favors with contacts at NSA's local field office. Nothing. The packets carry their secrets like locked boxes, passing through our networks while revealing nothing about their purpose. Elric stopped by my workstation around 1300. Noticed the analysis displays, asked what I was working on. When I showed him the anomalous traffic patterns, his expression shifted. Just for a second, a micro-expression that looked almost like recognition. Then his usual mentor mask slipped back into place. Probably just new vendor equipment creating compatibility issues, he said. You know how these municipal contracts work. Some contractor deployed gear that doesn't play nice with our existing infrastructure. But I've been doing this job for 8 years. I know the difference between compatibility issues and coordinated infiltration. This isn't some contractor's sloppy configuration management. I'm filing this log as urgent classification because my gut tells me we're looking at the early stages of something big. The traffic patterns suggest preparation rather than attack, like someone's mapping our infrastructure, testing response times, cataloging system dependencies. Reconnaissance before the real operation begins. If I'm wrong, worst case scenario is I waste some time chasing digital phantoms. If I'm right, Dallas has 1.3 million people, depending on the systems these ghost packets are infiltrating. Our power grid supplies critical infrastructure across North Texas. Our emergency services coordinate response for the entire metropolitan area. Our traffic management systems handle millions of commuter movements daily. Whatever these phantom networks are preparing for, they're targeting the foundation of everything that keeps the city alive. Continuing investigation. We'll coordinate with Halen to cross-reference emergency dispatch anomalies with network intrusion timestamps. Also planning to dig deeper into those encryption signatures. Something about the mathematical structure feels familiar, like I've seen pieces of this code before. The screens around my workstation are humming louder than usual tonight, almost like they're trying to whisper something I can't quite hear. N-log entry number 001. Next scheduled update, 1800 hours. Priority, escalate if patterns persist. Emergency log entry number 002. Dallas Metropolitan Network Operations Center. Analyst, Osric Chun, Senior Network Security. Date, October 16, 2024, 8:45 Central Standard Time. Classification, critical. The ghost traffic isn't theoretical anymore. It's taking action. Power grid fluctuations started at 0347 hours. Not blackouts, something more subtle. Voltage irregularities that lasted exactly 3.7 seconds across 17 substations simultaneously. Our monitoring systems flagged it as equipment malfunction, but the timing was too precise, too coordinated. I've been here since 0500, cross-referencing yesterday's phantom network activity with this morning's power anomalies. The correlation is undeniable. Every substation that experienced fluctuations had registered those mysterious encrypted packets 12 hours earlier. Halen called me 20 minutes ago, voice shaking. Oz, something's happening at dispatch. The computers are going insane. 911 systems started generating false emergency reports around 0630. Not the random automated calls from yesterday. These are detailed, location-specific incidents that sound completely legitimate until responders arrive to find nothing. House fires at addresses that don't exist. Multi-car accidents on empty highways. Medical emergencies for people who aren't there. We dispatched 3 ambulances to Elm Street for a cardiac arrest, Halen said. GPS coordinates were perfect, call details matched protocol exactly. But when EMS arrived, they found an empty lot. No building, no patient, no sign anyone had ever been there. The fake emergency calls are consuming resources, sending first responders across the city chasing phantom crises. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is how the calls are getting through our verification systems. Every false report carries authentication codes that match our database. The calls are coming from inside our own infrastructure. I pulled the communication logs from the 911 center. The automated reports are generating from legitimate system endpoints, computers that should only be receiving emergency data, not creating it. Like the network has developed its own agenda. Traffic management systems started their own breakdown around 0800. Signal timing glitches at major intersections, causing backups but nothing severe enough to trigger emergency protocols. Green lights lasting 10 seconds too long. Yellow phases cutting short by precise intervals. The kind of disruptions that create chaos without setting off alarms. My workstation displays are crawling with new anomaly alerts. The phantom traffic from yesterday has multiplied overnight. Instead of single packets moving between systems, we're seeing coordinated data streams flowing through every critical network in the metropolitan area. The encryption signatures are evolving too, adaptive algorithms that change their structure every few hours. I tried reaching Elric for consultation, but his office says he's in meetings all morning. Classified briefings that weren't on yesterday's schedule. When I asked his assistant about the emergency nature of my request, she just repeated the same script. Mr. Walsh will be available this afternoon for routine consultations. Nothing about this situation feels routine. Tavin noticed my stress when I got home last night. You look like you've seen the future, he said, and didn't like what you found. He wasn't wrong. There's a pattern emerging from the chaos, but I can't quite see its shape yet. Like watching a predator circle in tall grass. You know something's hunting, but can't tell what or when it will strike. The power fluctuations are spreading. Started with 17 substations, now we're seeing irregularities at 43 locations across North Texas. Same 3.7-second duration, same voltage characteristics. The electrical grid is being tested, probed for weaknesses with surgical precision. Financial networks are showing stress indicators too. Not the phantom traffic, something different. Transaction processing delays that cascade through banking systems without triggering fraud alerts. ATM networks experiencing micro outages that last just long enough to create customer complaints, but not long enough to generate incident reports. Every system failure is designed to stay below our emergency response thresholds. Individual incidents that look like random malfunctions, but collectively paint a picture of coordinated infrastructure testing. Someone is mapping our city's digital nervous system, learning exactly how much pressure each component can handle before breaking. Halen sent me the dispatch logs from this morning. 47 false emergency calls, each one sending responders to legitimate addresses for non-existent crises. The geographic distribution isn't random. They're targeting areas with critical infrastructure. Power plants, water treatment facilities, communication hubs. Drawing emergency services away from the locations that keep Dallas running. The screens in our operations center are displaying error messages I've never seen before. System diagnostics that report everything is functioning normally, while simultaneously cataloging dozens of micro-failures. It's like watching our infrastructure develop a fever, vital signs that look stable on the surface while something infectious spreads through the digital bloodstream. I've requested emergency consultation with our federal liaison contacts. If this is nation-state level infiltration, we need resources beyond municipal capabilities. But the request forms are getting lost in the system. Submitted tickets that vanish from the database. Authorization codes that suddenly become invalid. Even our internal communications are becoming unreliable. Email servers experiencing routine maintenance that wasn't scheduled. Voice systems developing echoes and static on calls between critical personnel. The infrastructure is turning against itself, becoming less reliable exactly when we need maximum coordination. The phantom networks are no longer hiding. They're announcing their presence through controlled system failures, testing our responses, measuring our capabilities. Like a chess player revealing their pieces one move at a time, confident the game is already won. Dallas is being prepared for something. The question isn't whether an attack is coming, it's when, and whether we'll have any functional systems left to defend with. End log entry number 002. Next update, continuous monitoring required. Priority, escalate to federal authorities. Status, escalation attempts failing. Emergency log entry number 003. Dallas Metropolitan Network Operations Center. Analyst, Osric Chun, Senior Network Security. Date, October 16, 2024, 1923 Central Standard Time. Classification, classified, internal investigation. I found the signature. Hidden in the encryption algorithms, buried beneath layers of adaptive code, mathematical structures I recognize from my early training days. Elric's work. His digital fingerprints are all over the phantom network infiltration. Spent the afternoon running pattern analysis on the encrypted payloads. The base algorithmic framework uses a modified Fibonacci sequence integration that Elric developed for NSA Black projects back in 2019. I know because I helped him debug the initial implementation during my security clearance internship. At the time, he called it digital DNA, code that could identify its creator even through multiple layers of obfuscation. The realization hit me like ice water. My mentor, the man who taught me everything about network security, whose protocols I've been following for years. He's the architect of Dallas's systematic infiltration. I tried calling his direct line 6 times this afternoon. Each call went straight to an automated message. Mr. Walsh is engaged in classified consultation. Please direct urgent security matters to designated backup personnel. But there are no designated backup personnel for this level of infiltration. The system is designed so only Elric has the clearance to address threats of this magnitude. That's not a coincidence. That's planning. Halen agreed to meet me at the old coffee shop near City Hall after her shift ended. She looked exhausted. 16 hours of fielding phantom emergency calls will do that. Her hands shook as she described today's escalation. 93 false reports, she said. We're sending ambulances to abandoned warehouses, fire trucks to empty lots, police to addresses that haven't existed for decades. But the calls are coming through verified 911 systems. Authentication protocols that only authorized personnel should have access to. I showed her the code analysis on my laptop, pointed out the Fibonacci modifications that tagged Elric as the source. She went pale, then angry. You're saying your mentor is deliberately sabotaging emergency services? While people could be dying. That's exactly what I'm saying. But it's worse than simple sabotage. The phantom emergency calls are strategically dispersing first responders away from critical infrastructure. Every fake cardiac arrest sends an ambulance away from the hospital district. Every fabricated accident pulls police from downtown financial areas. Every false fire alarm draws trucks from industrial zones. Elric isn't just testing our systems. He's preparing the battlefield. I spent 2 hours analyzing response patterns from the past 48 hours. The false emergency locations form a perfect radius around Dallas's most critical infrastructure nodes. Power generation facilities, water treatment plants, major communication hubs, financial data centers. All of them are being systematically stripped of nearby emergency response coverage. The mathematical precision is terrifying. Whoever planned this infiltration has complete knowledge of our emergency response algorithms, dispatch protocols, and resource allocation systems. They know exactly how many phantom calls it takes to leave specific areas vulnerable. And the only person with that level of system access is Elric Walsh. I tried accessing his personnel files through the secure database. Blocked. Attempted to review his recent project assignments. Classified beyond my clearance level. Even tried pulling his building access logs for the past week. System error. Records temporarily unavailable. Every digital trail that might explain Elric's involvement has been scrubbed or secured beyond my reach. Like someone anticipated an internal investigation and prepared countermeasures. Around 1,700 hours, I received a text message from an unknown number. Stop digging, Osric. Some foundations are better left undisturbed. A friend. The message used my full first name. Very few people know I prefer the shortened version. The phrasing matched Elric's formal communication style, and the timestamp showed it was sent from inside our building while he was supposedly in classified meetings. My workstation started experiencing routine system updates immediately after I received the text. Login delays, file access restrictions, network connectivity issues that forced me to use manual backup procedures. The same disruption patterns we've been seeing across city infrastructure, now targeted at my personal investigation. I'm being warned off, maybe threatened, but I can't stop. Not when I understand what's happening. The phantom networks aren't preparing to attack Dallas, they're preparing to control it. Every system infiltration maps control points rather than destruction targets. Every false emergency call tests response manipulation rather than service disruption. Someone wants to take over the city's infrastructure without destroying it. A bloodless coup executed through digital manipulation rather than physical force. And my mentor, the man who taught me to trust network logs because numbers don't have agendas, is orchestrating the entire operation. Halen asked me what I'm going to do with this information. Who I can trust if Elric is compromised? The answer terrifies me. I don't know. Federal authorities? My escalation attempts keep disappearing into digital black holes. Local law enforcement? They're being systematically misdirected by phantom emergency calls. Other network security personnel? They all trained under Elric's protocols, following procedures he designed. I may be the only person in Dallas who understands what's happening, and I'm rapidly losing access to the tools I need to stop it. The screens around my workstation are humming a different frequency tonight, almost like they're trying to communicate in code I don't recognize. The ghost networks are no longer hiding their presence, they're advertising it, confident that their infiltration is too complete to be reversed. Tomorrow, I'm going to confront Elric directly. Demand answers about his involvement in the systematic compromise of Dallas infrastructure. It might cost me my job, my security clearance, maybe my freedom. But if I'm right about the scope of this operation, staying silent will cost the entire city. End log entry number 003. Next update, pending direct confrontation. Priority, maximum, internal threat confirmed. Status, investigation continues despite obstruction. Emergency log entry number 004. Dallas Metropolitan Network Operations Center. Analyst, Osric Chun, Senior Network Security. Date, October 17, 2024, 11:47 Central Standard Time. Classification, eyes-only compromised systems. Traffic management collapsed at 0834 hours. Not gradually, all at once, like someone flipped a kill switch across the entire metropolitan grid. Intersection signals defaulted to flashing red simultaneously across 847 controlled traffic points. Highway merge systems began displaying contradictory instructions. Construction zone alerts activated for roads that had no construction. Speed limit displays started cycling through random numbers every 30 seconds. The chaos was immediate and catastrophic. 17 major accidents within the first hour. Emergency services overwhelmed by genuine crises, while still chasing phantom calls from yesterday's infiltration. Exactly the scenario someone wanted to create. I was analyzing overnight network logs when the traffic systems failed. The phantom networks had been flooding transportation infrastructure with encrypted commands since 0400 hours. Preparation phase complete, now executing active disruption. My secure phone buzzed at 0847. Unknown caller, voice distortion software, but I recognized the phrasing patterns immediately. Osric, meet me in conference room C, sublevel 3. Come alone. Tell no one. You have 10 minutes before the next phase begins. Roran Kim, IT Director for the Regional Coordination Center. I'd worked with him on cross-platform security protocols 2 years ago, but he wasn't supposed to have access to voice distortion equipment or knowledge of classified timing schedules. Sublevel 3 doesn't officially exist in our building directory, but I knew how to access it: maintenance elevator, override code that Elric had shared during my advanced clearance training. Another piece of information that shouldn't be widely available. Roran was waiting in a conference room I'd never seen before. Banks of monitors displaying real-time feeds from across Dallas infrastructure. Traffic cameras, power grid status displays, emergency dispatch boards, hospital system monitors. A command center hidden beneath our legitimate operations. Jesus, Hora, what is this place? He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Nervous energy, constantly checking his watch, eyes darting between the monitors and the door. Project Cascade, he said. 3 years in development. Complete infrastructure reset protocols designed to modernize emergency response systems. That's what they told us, anyway. The monitors showed traffic chaos spreading across the city. Accidents backing up major arteries. Emergency vehicles trapped in gridlock while trying to respond to the phantom calls still flooding dispatch centers. A perfect storm of coordinated system failures. They told you? Who's they, Roran? He pulled up a classified organizational chart on the main display. Names I recognized from federal briefings, municipal oversight committees, private contractors with security clearances I didn't know existed. At the center of the web, Elric Walsh, Project Director. Controlled Societal Infrastructure Reset, Roran said, reading from a document marked Eyes Only. Temporary disruption of inefficient legacy systems to enable rapid deployment of next-generation coordination protocols. Minimal civilian impact, maximum systematic improvement. The language was sanitized, bureaucratic, but the reality displayed on those monitors was chaos and terror. People trapped in traffic jams, ambulances unable to reach actual emergencies, police diverted to non-existent crimes while real crises unfolded. Roran, people are dying out there. I know. His voice cracked. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. The projections showed controlled disruption, surgical system replacement. But the traffic cascade is 3 times worse than modeled. And the phantom emergency calls, they're supposed to redirect resources, not eliminate them entirely. He showed me the original cascade timeline. Phase 1, network infiltration and system mapping. Phase 2, controlled infrastructure testing. Phase 3, surgical replacement of critical systems with improved alternatives. We were supposed to be in Phase 2. Instead, someone had activated Phase 4 protocols, complete systematic collapse followed by emergency federal intervention. Who authorized the acceleration? I asked. Roran's hands shook as he pulled up another classified file. Authorization codes, digital signatures, timestamp logs. All of them traced back to Elric Walsh, but the timing was wrong. Commands issued while he was supposed to be in meetings, decisions made faster than any human could process the data. Either Elric has been planning this acceleration for months, Roran said, or someone else is using his authorization codes to push Cascade beyond its original parameters. The monitors showed new crisis indicators appearing across Dallas. Hospital systems experiencing routine maintenance outages during peak emergency influx. Financial networks having scheduled downtime that wasn't on any official calendar. Water treatment facilities showing sensor calibration errors that looked suspiciously like contamination alerts. Phase 4 wasn't surgical infrastructure replacement. It was systematic collapse designed to create emergency conditions that would justify federal intervention and martial law protocols. How do we stop it? I asked. Roran looked at me like I'd suggested stopping a hurricane with an umbrella. The Cascade protocols are distributed across 17 different network nodes. Each one has independent execution authority. Even if we could access the command systems, we'd need authorization codes from at least 12 different project directors, including Elric. Especially Elric. He's the primary authorization key for the entire project. My secure phone buzzed again. Text message from the same unknown number as yesterday. Conference room C is not secure. End your consultation immediately. Phase 4 cannot be delayed. Elric knew where I was, knew what I was learning, and he was accelerating the timeline because I was getting too close to the truth. The monitors around us started displaying new alerts. Power grid instabilities spreading beyond the original 17 substations. Communication networks experiencing maintenance outages that looked like coordinated shutdowns. Emergency services reporting complete system failures across multiple districts. Dallas wasn't just being infiltrated anymore. It was being systematically destroyed and rebuilt according to someone's vision of improved social order. And I was running out of time to stop it. End log entry number 004. Next update, unknown, systems compromised. Priority, critical, project cascade revealed. Status, active resistance required. Emergency log entry number 005. Dallas Metropolitan Network Operations Center. Analyst, Osric Chun, Senior Network Security. Date, October 17, 2024, 14:23 Central Standard Time. Classification, unsecured, all encryption compromised. The hospitals fell first. At 1,247 hours, every major medical facility in Dallas experienced simultaneous critical system failures. Patient monitoring equipment defaulted to error states. Medication dispensing systems locked down. Electronic health records became inaccessible. Surgical suites lost power regulation. But it wasn't random system failure. Someone had pushed the cascade acceleration button. I was still in the sublevel command center with Roran when the medical emergency alerts started flooding the monitors. Presbyterian Hospital Dallas, Baylor University Medical Center, UT Southwestern, all showing identical failure patterns across completely different network architectures. "This is impossible," Roran whispered, pulling up diagnostic data. "Each hospital uses different vendors, different security protocols. There's no single point of failure that could cause this." But there was. Project Cascade had spent 3 years mapping every network dependency, every shared protocol, every potential vulnerability. They'd built backdoors into systems that were supposed to be isolated from external networks. The emergency dispatch feeds showed the real horror. Ambulances arriving at hospitals that couldn't monitor patients. Surgery rooms going dark mid-procedure. ICU units losing life support coordination. Emergency room intake systems displaying corrupted data that showed every incoming patient as simultaneously dead and requiring immediate intervention. My personal phone, the civilian one I'd kept powered off since yesterday, started vibrating with emergency alerts. Then I heard something that made my blood freeze. Halen's voice coming through the police dispatch radio. "All units, we have reports of dispatcher trapped in North Central Emergency Communications Center. Building lockdown initiated due to suspected network intrusion. Emergency personnel cannot access facility. Halen works North Central Dispatch. She's been trapped there since the lockdown protocols activated. I tried calling her cell phone. Dead. Her work line. System not responding. Even the emergency override codes Elric had taught me wouldn't connect to the dispatch center. Roran, I need to get to North Central." He was staring at the monitors, watching real-time feeds of Dallas tearing itself apart. "Osric, the entire city is in lockdown mode. Transportation systems are randomizing routes. Security systems are treating everyone as potential threats. Getting across town right now is suicide. My sister is trapped in that building." The words hit him like a physical blow. Project Cascade wasn't just numbers and network protocols anymore. It was family members trapped in facilities that had turned into automated prisons. "The lockdown protocols," he said, pulling up another classified file. "They're not just securing buildings. They're isolating personnel to prevent coordinated resistance to the system replacement." I watched the feeds from across Dallas. Police stations with officers locked inside their own facilities. Fire departments unable to access their equipment bays. Emergency personnel trapped in the very buildings they were supposed to use to help the city. Controlled infrastructure reset. They'd turned every emergency responder into a hostage. My secure phone buzzed. Text from Elric. "Osric, report to primary command center immediately. Phase 4 requires all available analysts. Your sister's safety depends on protocol compliance." He knew about Halen. Of course he knew. He'd been monitoring my communications, tracking my movements, preparing to use my family as leverage. "I have to go," I told Roran. "Where?" "To Elric. He's the one orchestrating this. To get my sister out of that building." Roran grabbed my arm. "The lockdown protocols have armed security measures, automated systems that identify anyone attempting unauthorized access as hostile. You'll be walking into a kill zone. Then help me. You know these systems. You helped build them." He looked at the monitors again. The medical emergency feeds were getting worse. Hospitals operating on backup power, surgical procedures halted mid-operation, patients dying because their monitoring equipment couldn't communicate with life support systems. "There's something else," he said quietly. "Something I didn't tell you about Phase 4. He pulled up a timeline I hadn't seen before. Project Cascade wasn't ending with infrastructure replacement. It was designed to create conditions for federal emergency intervention, martial law protocols that would suspend local governance and implement direct federal control of all municipal systems. They're not trying to fix Dallas, I realized. They're trying to destroy it so completely that federal emergency powers become the only option. Controlled societal collapse, Roran said, reading from the classified documentation. Create conditions requiring emergency federal intervention. Suspend local governance. Implement centralized control protocols under national security authority. The lockdown protocols weren't protecting emergency personnel. They were ensuring that local authorities couldn't coordinate effective resistance to federal takeover. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a video message from an unknown number. Halen, sitting in the North Central Dispatch Center, surrounded by screens showing system errors and emergency alerts she couldn't respond to. "Osric, if you're getting this, the building's been locked down for 3 hours. Backup power is failing. The automated systems keep cycling through lockdown protocols, but they're not designed for extended operation. I estimate another 4 hours before complete power failure. 4 hours. After that, every automated security system in the building would fail simultaneously, including life support and emergency exits." "The dispatch center has independent power systems," Roran said, checking building schematics. "But they're tied to the same network infrastructure that's being systematically compromised. When those systems fail, she'll be trapped in a building with no power, no communication, and no way out." I looked at the monitors showing Dallas in chaos. Traffic systems randomizing routes to prevent coordinated movement. Emergency services locked down and isolated. Hospitals operating in crisis mode with corrupted data systems. This wasn't infrastructure replacement. It was systematic destruction designed to justify authoritarian intervention. And somewhere in the middle of it, Elric was waiting for me to choose between my professional duty and my family's survival. My secure phone displayed a new message. Primary Command Center. 15 minutes. Your sister's emergency protocols can be overridden, but only with proper authorization codes. He was offering to save Halen in exchange for my compliance with Project Cascade. I looked at Roran. "Can you access the North Central building systems from here?" "Maybe. But any attempt to override the lockdown protocols will trigger additional security measures. I'd be flagged as a hostile actor." "And if we do nothing?" He didn't answer. We both knew what would happen when the backup power failed and the automated systems defaulted to maximum security lockdown. Halen would die in that building, and Dallas would burn while federal emergency teams moved in to restore order. I had to choose: save my sister and become complicit in the destruction of my city, or resist Project Cascade and watch my family die in a building turned into an automated tomb. Time remaining, 3 hours, 47 minutes. The networks weren't just crumbling anymore. They were being weaponized. And I was the only one who could stop it. End log entry number 005. Next update, survival mode activated. Priority, critical, family rescue required. Status, active resistance, point of no return. Emergency log entry number 006. Mobile recording device, location unknown. Analyst, Osric Chun, Senior Network Security. Date, October 17, 2024, 1752 Central Standard Time. Classification, unsecured, recording from compromised position. Communications blackout hit at 1,534 hours. Every cell tower, every landline, every emergency radio frequency, dead silence across Dallas metropolitan area. Project Cascade had severed the city's ability to coordinate any organized response. I never made it to Elric's command center meeting. Instead, I ran. Through corridors filled with emergency lighting and the sound of automated systems cycling through failure protocols. Past offices where analysts stared at blank screens, their network access revoked by the same systems they'd spent years maintaining. Roran stayed behind in the sub-level command center, working frantically to override North Central's lockdown before Halen's backup power failed. I gave him my authorization codes, everything I had access to, and told him to use whatever he could to keep her alive. Then I broke every protocol I'd ever learned and went rogue. The city above ground was a nightmare of coordinated chaos. Traffic signals cycling through patterns that seemed designed to maximize gridlock. Street cameras tracking pedestrians with facial recognition software that flagged everyone as potential security threats. Electronic billboards displaying contradictory emergency instructions in multiple languages, none of them helpful. But the worst part was the silence. No police sirens, no ambulance calls, no emergency broadcasts. Dallas had been rendered mute while it died. I was trying to navigate the surface streets toward North Central when I found Tavin. My partner was trapped in his car at the intersection of Commerce and Field, part of a gridlock that stretched for blocks in every direction. The traffic management system had directed hundreds of vehicles into a deliberate bottleneck, then locked all the signals to red. His car door was jammed. Electronic locks had engaged during the emergency security protocol and wouldn't respond to manual override. Through the window, I could see blood on his forehead where he'd hit the steering wheel when the car behind him had rear-ended his vehicle during the sudden traffic stop. Osric, his voice was muffled through the glass. The car systems are locked down. I can't get out. The air conditioning isn't working, and the windows won't open. Electronic systems designed for safety and convenience had become automated prisons. Just like Halen's dispatch center, Tavin's car was trapping him while the city burned around us. I tried my emergency override codes on his vehicle's security system. Access denied. The same authorization that had worked for years was suddenly invalid, overridden by Project Cascade protocols that treated every civilian as a potential threat requiring containment. Stand back from the driver's side window, I told him. I used my security badge, reinforced metal edge, to shatter the glass. Tavin climbed out, bleeding from cuts on his arms, gasping in the humid October air like he'd been suffocating. "What the hell is happening?" he asked. "How do you explain that your entire city has been turned into a weapons system? That every convenience, every safety feature, every technological advancement has been systematically compromised to serve someone's vision of controlled societal collapse?" "System failure," I said. It was the truth, just not the complete truth. We started walking toward North Central, dodging between gridlocked vehicles and trying to stay away from the street cameras that tracked our movement with mechanical precision. Every intersection was a maze of trapped cars and confused people trying to understand why their city had suddenly turned against them. The electronic billboards began displaying new messages at 1,647 hours. Emergency federal intervention authorized. Local authorities unable to maintain order. Remain in place for safety processing. Compliance ensures civilian protection. Project Cascade was entering its final phase. Create enough chaos to justify federal emergency powers, then use those powers to implement the improved control systems that had been the real goal from the beginning. "Osric," Tavin said, pointing to a convoy of federal vehicles moving against traffic on the shoulder of the highway. "Those aren't local emergency services. Military transport trucks, federal emergency coordination units, communication equipment I recognized from national security briefings. The cavalry arriving to save Dallas from the crisis they'd helped engineer." My phone, the civilian one, suddenly powered itself on and displayed a text message. "Federal Coordination Center established. Report for civilian processing. Resistance subjects will be detained for public safety." They were tracking every device, every person, every movement. The same surveillance infrastructure that was supposed to protect us had become a manhunting system. "We need to get off the streets," I told Tavin. But there was nowhere safe to go. Every building with electronic locks had defaulted to security mode. Every vehicle was a potential trap. Every camera was watching for non-compliant behavior. We found shelter in an abandoned construction site, one of the few places in Dallas that didn't have comprehensive electronic surveillance. While Tavin treated his cuts with a first aid kit from a construction trailer, I tried to contact the sub-level command center, using a handheld radio I'd taken from the network operations building. "Static," Then faintly Roran's voice. Backup power failing. Dispatch center sealed. Can override. Authorization codes revoked. Halen was running out of time, and my attempt to save her by giving Roran my access codes had failed. Project Cascade had anticipated insider resistance and revoked authorization for anyone who tried to interfere with the lockdown protocols. Federal teams entering building, automated systems treating them as hostile, massacre in progress. The radio cut to static. The federal rescue teams were being killed by the same automated security systems that were supposed to protect emergency facilities. Project Cascade had turned every building into a death trap that couldn't distinguish between authorized personnel and actual threats. Tavin was looking at me with the expression of someone who'd realized that the person they trusted most had been keeping deadly secrets. "You know what's happening," he said. Not a question. I told him about Project Cascade, about the hidden organization, about Elric and the systematic destruction disguised as infrastructure improvement, about my sister trapped in a building that was designed to kill anyone who tried to enter or leave without proper authorization. "And you worked for these people?" "I thought I was protecting the city. I thought we were building better security systems." Tavin looked at the chaos surrounding us, the gridlocked traffic, the silent emergency services, the federal vehicles moving through streets that had been turned into automated killing fields. How do we stop it? That was the question I'd been avoiding. How do you stop a system that's distributed across hundreds of network nodes, protected by automated security that kills anyone who gets too close, and backed by federal emergency powers that treat resistance as terrorism? My radio crackled again. Roran's voice, barely audible. "Found override protocol. Requires physical access to primary command center. Elric has kill switch manual shutdown possible but..." Static swallowed the rest of the transmission. Somewhere in Dallas, there was a way to stop Project Cascade, but it required getting to Elric's primary command center, the place he'd been trying to lure me to for hours. The trap was obvious. He wanted me there, wanted me to see the full scope of what he'd accomplished, wanted me to understand that resistance was futile and compliance was the only option for survival. But it was also the only chance to save Halen, to save Tavin, to save what was left of my city. I looked at Tavin, bleeding and exhausted in the ruins of Dallas. "We're going to try to shut down the system that's doing this. It's probably a suicide mission." He nodded. "Your sister? Probably already dead. But maybe not. Then we go." In the distance, federal emergency vehicles continued their systematic movement through streets designed to funnel them toward predetermined positions. Project Cascade was working exactly as planned, creating the conditions for authoritarian intervention while eliminating anyone who might coordinate effective resistance. Time remaining, unknown. Survivors, uncertain. Mission, stop Project Cascade or die trying. The networks had stopped crumbling. They'd become weapons, and we were walking into the crosshairs. End log entry number 006. Next update, if possible. Priority, critical, final approach. Status, survival mode, all bridges burned. Emergency log entry number 007. Handwritten notes, electronic recording compromised. Analyst, Osric Chun, Senior Network Security. Date, October 17th, 2024, 21:18 Central Standard Time. Classification, personal record, final testimony. I'm writing this by hand in the ruins of North Central Emergency Communications Center. The building's backup power failed at 20:47 hours. Every automated system died simultaneously, locks, life support, emergency exits, everything. We found Halen in the dispatch center, still at her station. She'd been trying to coordinate emergency responses until the very end, writing dispatch notes by hand when the computer systems failed, using a battery-powered radio to send out warnings that no one could hear through the communications blackout. The logbook beside her showed her final entries. Hour 6, backup power at 12%. Still receiving emergency calls through landline system. Cannot dispatch, all units locked down in their facilities. Hour 7, power at 4%. Writing manual dispatch logs. If anyone finds this, emergency services personnel are trapped in the following locations. She documented every emergency she couldn't respond to, every trapped first responder, every call for help that went unanswered. 37 pages of handwritten records showing a city dying while its protectors were locked away. Her final entry, Hour 8, power failure imminent. Building sealed. If Osric gets this, the override codes are in Dad's old service manual. Page 127. I love you. Dad's Navy electrical manual. She'd remembered something from our childhood, some technical reference that might contain the authorization codes needed to shut down Project Cascade. Even dying, she'd been trying to save the city. Tavin found her first. He called out to me from the dispatch center, and I knew from his voice what I was going to find. She was slumped over her desk, one hand still holding the pen, the other reaching toward the manual override switch that would never respond to her commands. The building's automated systems had killed her as efficiently as any weapon. No air circulation, no emergency power, no way to escape when the oxygen ran low. She'd suffocated in the place she'd spent 5 years protecting other people. I held her hand while Tavin searched the building for Dad's manual. It was in her emergency locker, wrapped in plastic, every page carefully preserved. Page 127 contained override codes for legacy emergency systems, codes that predated Project Cascade, codes that might still work if the system hadn't anticipated military-grade authorization sequences. But it was too late for Halen. Too late for the 37 emergencies she'd documented. Too late for the first responders who'd died locked in their own facilities. We made it to the primary command center at 2,134 hours. The location wasn't hard to find. Every electronic system in Dallas was routing data to the same coordinates, a federal building that had been transformed into the nerve center of Project Cascade. Elric was waiting for us in the main operations room, surrounded by monitors showing the systematic destruction of Dallas. Traffic systems creating deliberate accidents, hospital networks corrupting patient data, emergency services locked down and helpless. Federal intervention teams moving through predetermined routes while automated systems eliminated any potential resistance. Osric, he said, not looking surprised to see me. I assume you found your sister. She's dead. I'm sorry. The dispatch center lockdown wasn't supposed to last that long, but you chose resistance over compliance. There were consequences. He gestured to the monitors around us. Look at what we've accomplished. Complete systematic transformation in less than 18 hours. Every inefficient legacy system replaced with coordinated federal oversight. No more jurisdictional disputes, no more bureaucratic delays, no more local corruption interfering with optimal resource allocation. The screens showed Dallas under martial law. Federal emergency teams had established checkpoints at every major intersection. Citizens were being processed through identification stations before being allowed to return to their homes. Emergency services were being restructured under federal command. You killed my sister to create a police state. I optimized emergency response systems to prevent future casualties. Your sister died because local authorities couldn't coordinate effective crisis management. Under the new system, that won't happen again. Tavin was standing behind me, holding the battery-powered radio we'd used to track federal communications. Through the static, we could hear reports from across the city, casualty estimates, infrastructure damage assessments, civilian compliance statistics. Preliminary casualty reports, a voice said through the radio. Approximately 340 confirmed civilian deaths due to system failures. 67 emergency personnel casualties from lockdown protocols. 23 federal intervention team members eliminated by automated security systems. 430 people dead to justify federal takeover of municipal infrastructure. Hundreds more trapped in their own homes by security systems that had turned every electronic lock into a prison cell. You murdered 400 people, I said. I prevented 4,000 future deaths from inefficient crisis response. The mathematical optimization is clear, Osric. You're thinking emotionally instead of systematically. He pulled up a presentation on the main screen. Project Cascade Phase 5, Reconstruction. New emergency protocols, federal coordination systems, centralized command authority. Every system designed to prevent the kind of local failure that had allegedly caused today's crisis. Dallas is the pilot program, Elric continued. Within 6 months, we'll implement Cascade protocols in Houston, San Antonio, Austin. Within 2 years, every major metropolitan area will have coordinated federal emergency infrastructure. No more preventable deaths due to jurisdictional incompetence. The monitors showed federal teams installing new communication equipment, new traffic management systems, new emergency coordination centers. All of it designed to prevent local authorities from ever again having the independence to resist federal intervention. You're rebuilding the city as a surveillance state. I'm rebuilding the city as an optimized emergency response system. Every citizen monitored for potential crisis indicators. Every vehicle tracked for optimal traffic flow. Every communication analyzed for coordination efficiency. No more chaos, no more preventable deaths. I looked at the manual override panel in the center of the command room. Physical switches that could shut down Project Cascade, return control to local authorities, stop the systematic transformation of Dallas into a federal control experiment. But activating the override would also shut down the new emergency systems that were already in place. The federal teams coordinating rescue operations. The replacement infrastructure that was keeping hospitals operational. The traffic management preventing further accidents. Choose carefully, Elric said, watching my eyes. Shut down Cascade, and you'll kill everyone who depends on the new systems for survival. Leave it active, and we continue the transformation that will prevent future tragedies. The same impossible choice he'd been offering all along. Compliance or catastrophe. Accept the authoritarian solution, or watch more people die. I looked at Tavin, holding the radio that carried reports of federal teams processing civilians for compliance with new security protocols. I thought about Halen, dying alone in a building that had been turned into an automated tomb. I thought about the 430 people who'd been sacrificed to justify this systematic destruction of local democracy. There's a third option, I said. I pulled out Dad's manual, turned to page 127, and started entering the legacy override codes that Halen had died trying to give me. The monitors around us began displaying system warnings. Unauthorized override detected. Federal authority required for system modification. You're going to kill people, Osric. The new systems are all that's keeping the city functional. Then we'll find another way, without turning Dallas into a prison. I entered the final authorization code. Every screen in the command center went dark. In the distance, I could hear the sound of systems shutting down across the city. Traffic lights defaulting to manual control. Emergency services regaining access to their facilities. Federal coordination networks losing connection to local infrastructure. You've doomed them all, Elric said in the darkness. Maybe, but I'd also given them back the right to save themselves. The networks had stopped crumbling. Now it was time to see if Dallas could rebuild itself without federal chains. Log entry number 007. Next update, unknown, manual systems only. Priority, critical, override activated. Status, Halen's sacrifice honored. Emergency log entry number 008. Handwritten notes, electronic recording compromised. Analyst, Osric Chun, Senior Network Security. Date, October 18th, 2024, 3:42 Central Standard Time. Classification, personal record, testimony continued. The silence after shutting down Cascade lasted exactly 14 minutes. Then the backup systems activated. I should have known Elric wouldn't build a system with a single point of failure. The Federal Command Center had redundant networks, hardened against exactly the kind of manual override I'd just executed. Emergency power kicked in, bathing the operations room in red light, while automated systems began their reboot sequences. Phase 2 protocols activated, announced a synthetic voice through hidden speakers. Local override detected, initiating Federal Emergency Authority override. The monitors around us flickered back to life, displaying a new message. Financial systems integration commencing. Estimated time to completion, 6 hours. You delayed the inevitable, Elric said, his voice calm in the crimson glow. But you didn't stop it. That's when Roran appeared in the doorway, breathing hard like he'd been running. I hadn't seen him since his cryptic warning about Project Cascade, but now he looked terrified. They moved up the timeline, he said. Your override triggered the next phase early. They're not just taking over emergency services anymore, Osric. They're targeting the financial sector. He pulled out a tablet, its screen showing real-time data feeds from banks across Dallas. Account balances flickering. Transaction records being rewritten. Investment portfolios transferred to federal holding accounts. Every major bank in the city is connected to the Federal Reserve Network, Roran continued. Cascade Phase 2 uses that connection to implement what they're calling economic optimization. Citizens who comply with federal emergency protocols get access to their accounts. Those who resist get frozen out of the financial system entirely. The monitors around us displayed a map of Dallas with color-coded zones. Green areas showed compliant districts, where citizens had accepted federal emergency authority. Red zones marked resistance areas where local authorities were still trying to maintain independence. Citizens in compliant zones retain full financial access, Elric explained. Those in resistance zones are temporarily restricted until local authorities accept federal coordination. It's a simple incentive structure. You're holding the entire city's economy hostage. I'm implementing economic pressure to prevent further unnecessary casualties. Would you prefer armed federal intervention? Martial law. Economic restriction is more humane than military occupation. Roran was scrolling through data on his tablet, his face getting paler with each screen. It's not just Dallas, he said. I'm seeing federal connections activating in Houston, San Antonio, Austin. They're going to implement economic leverage against every major city in Texas simultaneously. The synthetic voice spoke again. Phase 2 integration at 15% completion. Estimated resistance collapse, 4 hours, 23 minutes. 4 hours until every person in Dallas would have to choose between financial survival and local autonomy. 4 hours until the federal government could control individual citizens by controlling their access to money. How long have you been planning this? I asked Elric. 18 months of preparation. 6 months of beta testing in smaller municipalities. Today was the full-scale implementation. Beta testing? Rural communities in West Texas. Small towns with limited technological infrastructure. We tested various combinations of system failures and federal intervention protocols. Optimized response times, casualty minimization, compliance percentages. The monitors showed historical data from those tests. Towns where mysterious infrastructure failures had led to federal emergency interventions. Communities that had accepted federal aid and never regained local authority. Citizens who'd been quietly processed through temporary security protocols that had never been lifted. You've been doing this for months. I've been perfecting the system for months. Dallas is the first major metropolitan implementation, but the methodology has been thoroughly validated. Roran was staring at his tablet like it contained something horrifying. Osric, you need to see this. The financial integration isn't just about control. They're implementing what they call resource optimization. He turned the tablet toward me. The screen showed algorithms analyzing individual spending patterns, employment records, social connections. Every person in Dallas was being assigned a social utility score based on their potential contribution to the optimized federal system. Citizens with high utility scores get priority access to resources during the transition. Roran read from the documentation. Those with low scores are designated for relocation assistance to areas with reduced infrastructure demands. You're planning to exile people from their own city. I'm implementing population distribution optimization, Elric corrected. Citizens whose skills and resources are better suited to rural environments will be provided with relocation incentives. Those who contribute to urban productivity will remain in the optimized metropolitan system. The maps on the monitors showed proposed relocation zones. Rural areas of Texas where low-utility citizens would be relocated. Areas with minimal technological infrastructure, limited financial access, reduced federal oversight. You're creating a two-tier society. Urban citizens under federal control, rural citizens in technological exile. I'm creating an optimized resource allocation system. Every citizen placed in the environment where they can contribute most effectively to social stability. Tavin had been silent through this exchange, but now he spoke up. What about families? What happens when your algorithm decides parents and children have different utility scores? The tablet in Roran's hands displayed family separation protocols. Children with high educational potential could be relocated to optimization centers for enhanced federal education. Parents with low utility scores would be relocated to rural zones. Families would be restructured based on algorithmic determinations of optimal social contribution. Family units are maintained where possible, Elric said. But individual optimization sometimes requires temporary separation for the greater social good. I looked at the manual override panel again. The physical switches that had shut down the first phase of Cascade. But now I could see additional panels throughout the command center. Backup systems, redundant networks, multiple layers of control that would prevent any single point of failure. How many override systems are there? 17 independent command centers across the Dallas metropolitan area, each with separate financial network access. You'd need to shut down all 17 simultaneously to stop Phase 2. Where are they? Classified federal facilities, protected by automated security systems. accessible only to personnel with appropriate clearance levels. Roran was still scrolling through data on his tablet. I might have clearance for some of them. My IT director access was never revoked from the federal systems. Using your clearance would trigger immediate federal response protocols, Elric warned. You'd be classified as a domestic terrorist. Your family would be relocated to remote containment facilities. My family's already dead, Roran said quietly. Car accident 3 months ago. Traffic system malfunction during one of your beta tests. The silence in the command center was deafening. Elric looked genuinely surprised for the first time since I'd known him. That wasn't supposed to happen during the testing phase. Tell that to my wife and daughter. Roran turned his tablet toward the manual override panel, connecting it to the federal network. I've been planning this for months, waiting for the right moment to shut down everything you've built. You'll destroy the economic stability of 4 million people. I'll give them back the right to choose their own economic future. The monitors around us began displaying new warnings. Unauthorized network access detected. Federal security protocols activated. They know we're here, Roran said. We have maybe 10 minutes before federal response teams arrive. Then we use those 10 minutes to shut down as many command centers as possible. I looked at Tavin, knowing what I was about to ask him to do. The radio. Can you coordinate with any local authorities who might still be functional? Maybe. If any of them survived the lockdown protocols, tell them to prepare for economic system failure. When we shut down the federal networks, every ATM, every credit card reader, every electronic payment system is going to go dark. They'll need to coordinate emergency services without any electronic infrastructure. Roran was typing rapidly on his tablet. I can access 7 of the 17 command centers remotely. The other 10 will require physical access. How long to shut down the 7? 3 minutes per center, 21 minutes total. We don't have 21 minutes. Then we prioritize the financial centers. If I can shut down the banking integration, the economic pressure system fails even if the other centers stay online. The monitors showed federal response teams mobilizing across the city. Armored vehicles, tactical units, electronic warfare specialists, all converging on our location. Do it, I said. Roran's fingers flew across the tablet screen. The first command center went dark, then the second. Each shutdown sent ripples across the federal network, causing system failures throughout the integration process. Phase 2 integration compromised, announced the synthetic voice. Initiating emergency protocols. Emergency protocols? I asked. If the economic integration fails, they implement direct federal control, Roran said without looking up from his tablet. Military occupation instead of economic pressure. The monitors showed federal forces receiving new orders. Instead of coordinating with local authorities, they were now moving to establish military checkpoints throughout Dallas. Occupation instead of integration. You're forcing them to show their true nature, Elric said. Economic pressure was more humane than military control. Economic blackmail isn't humane. It's just more subtle. Roran shut down the 5th command center. Then the 6th. One more, he said. The primary financial integration center. The tablet screen showed federal forces less than 5 minutes away from our location. But it also showed the last command center, the one that controlled the entire economic pressure system. I can shut it down, Roran said, but I'll need to stay connected to maintain the shutdown. If I disconnect, the system will restart automatically. Then we stay. All of us. The federal response teams won't negotiate. They'll eliminate anyone they find in here. I looked at the monitors showing military vehicles surrounding the building. At the tablet displaying the economic control system that was turning Dallas into a federal experiment. At Tavin, holding the radio that connected us to whatever local authorities might still be fighting for their city's independence. Halen died trying to give people a choice, I said. We finished what she started. Roran entered the final shutdown sequence. The economic integration system died, taking with it the federal government's ability to control individual citizens through financial pressure. But the sound of armored vehicles was getting closer, and the monitors showed federal forces preparing to implement military occupation of a city that had refused to accept economic chains. Phase 3, Elric said quietly. Direct federal control through military authority. How many phases are there? As many as necessary to achieve optimal social stability. The networks had stopped crumbling. The economic pressure had been eliminated. But the federal response was escalating to military occupation, and we were trapped in the command center with federal forces closing in. End log entry number 008. Next update, unknown, federal response imminent. Priority, critical, military occupation protocols activated. Status, economic control eliminated, preparing for final phase. Emergency log entry number 009. Handwritten notes, electronic recording compromised. Analyst, Osric Chun, Senior Network Security. Date, October 18, 2024, 4:17 Central Standard Time. Classification, personal record, final operation. The federal response teams reached the building at 0415 hours. Roran was still connected to his tablet, maintaining the shutdown of the economic control systems. Every few seconds, he'd mutter status updates. Financial integration at 0%. Banking networks isolated. Economic pressure eliminated. But the monitors around us showed the cost of our victory. Military checkpoints were being established at every major intersection in Dallas. Federal forces were implementing direct occupation protocols, bypassing the subtle economic pressure system we'd just destroyed. You've accelerated the timeline, Elric said, watching the tactical displays. Phase 3 was supposed to be implemented gradually over 6 months. Now they're deploying full military authority in 6 hours. Through the command center's reinforced windows, I could see armored vehicles surrounding the federal building. Tactical teams moving into position. Electronic warfare equipment being deployed to jam any remaining civilian communications. How many people are going to die? I asked. Fewer than would have died from prolonged economic instability, Elric replied. Military occupation is more efficient than economic pressure. Citizens comply faster when the authority is obvious rather than subtle. Tavin was working with the battery-powered radio, trying to coordinate with local authorities. I've got contact with 3 police stations and a fire department. They're all reporting federal forces demanding surrender of local command authority. Tell them to comply, Elric said. Resistance will only increase casualties. Tell them to coordinate, I countered. If they surrender independently, the federal forces can isolate and control each department separately. If they coordinate resistance, they might be able to maintain some local authority. The synthetic voice spoke again. Building breach commencing. Occupants have 60 seconds to surrender or face elimination. Roran looked up from his tablet. I can keep the economic systems shut down for maybe 10 more minutes. After that, the federal networks will implement automatic restart protocols that I can't override remotely. What about the other command centers? The ones we couldn't shut down remotely? Still operational. Still coordinating the military occupation. But without economic pressure, they can't implement gradual control. They have to use force. The monitors showed federal teams preparing to breach the building. Shaped charges on the main entrance. Tactical units positioned at every exit. Electronic countermeasures designed to disable any remaining communications equipment. They're going to kill us, Tavin said quietly. They're going to neutralize resistance to federal authority, Elric corrected. Standard protocol for terrorist activity. We're not terrorists. You've sabotaged federal emergency response systems during a crisis. You've interfered with economic stability measures. You've coordinated resistance to lawful federal authority. The legal definition is clear. I looked at the manual override panel one more time. The physical switches that had shut down Phase 1, but hadn't been able to stop Phase 2. Now Phase 3 was being implemented through military force, and we were trapped in the command center with federal forces preparing to eliminate us. There's one more option, I said. I pointed to a section of the command center I hadn't noticed before. A separate console labeled Emergency Protocols, Authorized Personnel Only. Unlike the other systems, this one had no electronic interface. Just physical switches and manual controls. What is it? System-wide emergency shutdown, Elric said. It's designed to shut down all federal emergency systems simultaneously in case of catastrophic failure. All of them? Every federal emergency system in the Dallas metropolitan area. Communications, transportation, economic integration, military coordination, everything. Including the systems keeping hospitals operational? Including the systems keeping hospitals operational. The sound of shaped charges echoed through the building. The federal teams were beginning their breach. How long would the shutdown last? Permanently. The emergency shutdown is designed to prevent cascading system failures by isolating all federal networks from local infrastructure. Once activated, federal systems can't reconnect without physical access to every individual command center. I looked at the console, a single red switch under a clear protective cover. Next to it, a placard reading, "Emergency shutdown. Authorization required. Casualties expected." How many casualties? Unknown. Every person currently dependent on federal emergency systems for survival. Hospital patients connected to federal medical networks. Emergency responders coordinating through federal communications. Citizens relying on federal transportation systems to evacuate dangerous areas. The monitors showed the scope of federal integration throughout Dallas. Hundreds of hospitals, thousands of emergency responders, millions of citizens who had become dependent on federal systems over the past 18 hours. You're asking me to choose between federal occupation and mass casualties. I'm asking you to choose between controlled transition and catastrophic failure. Roran was typing frantically on his tablet. The economic systems are starting to restart. I can't maintain the shutdown much longer. Federal forces are 30 seconds from the command center, Tavin reported through the radio. Local authorities are requesting guidance. I thought about Halen, dying in a building that had become an automated tomb. About the 430 people who had been sacrificed to justify federal intervention. About the families who would be separated by algorithmic determinations of social utility. There's a fourth option, I said. I grabbed Roran's tablet and began accessing the federal communication networks. If I couldn't shut down the systems permanently, maybe I could broadcast the truth about Project Cascade to every person in Dallas. The federal networks are hardened against unauthorized broadcasts, Elric said. But they're not hardened against authorized broadcasts from federal personnel. I was using Elric's own clearance codes, piggybacking on his authorization to access the emergency broadcast systems. The same networks that had been used to coordinate federal intervention could be used to expose the truth about the systematic destruction of local authority. Emergency broadcast system activated, the synthetic voice announced. Federal authorization confirmed. The monitors around us showed the broadcast going live across Dallas. Every television, every radio, every emergency communications system still functional in the city. This is Osric Chun, Senior Network Security Analyst. I spoke into the broadcast microphone. I'm broadcasting from the Federal Command Center coordinating the occupation of Dallas. What you're experiencing is not a response to infrastructure failure. It's a systematic federal takeover called Project Cascade. The federal forces outside the building were probably receiving orders to shut down the broadcast, but I had maybe 60 seconds before they could override the system. The infrastructure failures, the economic pressure, the military occupation, all of it is part of a planned federal program to eliminate local authority. Your city government didn't fail. It was sabotaged. I could hear the federal teams entering the building. Tactical units moving through the corridors toward the command center. The choice they're offering isn't between compliance and chaos. It's between federal control and local democracy. You can resist. You can coordinate. You can maintain local authority if you work together. Roran was still connected to his tablet, still holding the economic systems offline. Broadcast is reaching every functional communications system in Dallas. Citizens in the green zones, the areas marked as compliant, you're not safe. You're being processed for permanent federal oversight. Citizens in the red zones, the resistance areas, you're not alone. Local authorities are still fighting for your independence. The sound of federal forces was getting closer, maybe 30 seconds before they reached the command center. The manual override codes are in military electrical manuals, page 127. Every federal facility has physical shutdown switches. Every command center can be shut down by local authorities with the right authorization codes. I looked at the emergency shutdown console, the red switch that would shut down all federal systems permanently, but would also eliminate the electronic infrastructure keeping hospitals operational. Don't let them choose for you. Don't let them tell you that submission is safer than freedom. Dallas belongs to the people who live here, not to federal algorithms optimizing your lives for you. The federal team reached the command center door. I could hear them setting up breaching charges. The emergency shutdown is here if we need it. But I'd rather trust Dallas to save itself than sacrifice the city to stop federal control. I looked at Elric, who was watching the tactical displays with professional detachment. At Roran, still maintaining the economic system shutdown. At Tavin, coordinating with local authorities through the radio. This is Osric Chin, ending federal broadcast. Dallas, save yourselves. The broadcast ended just as the federal team breached the command center door. Federal agents. Nobody move. Tactical lights flooded the room. Laser sights painted red dots across our chests. The team leader was shouting commands while his unit secured the area. Osric Chun, you're under arrest for domestic terrorism, sabotage of federal emergency systems, and incitement to rebellion. I looked at the red emergency shutdown switch one more time. I could still activate it. Shut down every federal system in Dallas permanently. Force the city to survive on local authority alone. But the broadcast was already having effects. The monitors showed local authorities coordinating resistance across the city. Police departments refusing to surrender command authority. Emergency services maintaining independent operations. Citizens in the green zones abandoning federal processing centers and joining resistance in the red zones. The city's going to save itself, I said to Elric as the federal agents moved to restrain me. The city's going to destroy itself, he replied. Without federal coordination, the casualties will be exponential. We'll see. The federal team was securing the command center, but they were also monitoring communications throughout Dallas. Local authorities were using Dad's military manual codes to access federal facilities. Citizens were coordinating resistance through amateur radio networks the federal forces couldn't jam. Economic systems are restarting, Roran said as the agents restrained him. But it won't matter. The city knows the truth now. Phase 4, Elric said quietly. Direct military pacification of civilian resistance. How many phases are there? I asked again. As many as necessary. But as the federal agents led us out of the command center, I could hear something through Tavin's radio. Local authorities coordinating successful resistance at 3 federal facilities. Citizens providing support to emergency services operating independently of federal oversight. Dallas fighting back with the tools we'd given them. The networks had stopped crumbling. The economic pressure had been eliminated. The military occupation was meeting organized resistance. And somewhere in the city, people were using Dad's manual to shut down federal command centers one by one. End log entry number 009. Next update, unknown federal custody. Priority, critical, citywide resistance coordinated. Status, broadcast complete, Dallas fighting back. Emergency log entry number 010. Handwritten notes, electronic recording compromised. Analyst, Osric Chun, Senior Network Security. Date, November 15th, 2024, 14:22 Central Standard Time. Classification, personal record, final testimony. For weeks since the broadcast. For weeks since federal forces arrested me in the command center. For weeks since Dallas started fighting back. I'm writing this in what used to be the federal detention facility downtown. The building is now a coordination center for local emergency services, run by the same police and fire departments that refused to surrender during the occupation attempt. They released me yesterday, not because federal charges were dropped, but because there's no federal authority left in Dallas to prosecute them. The city won. But the cost? Tavin is sitting across from me as I write this, going through casualty reports from the past month. His left arm is in a sling from the federal raid on the communications center, where he'd been coordinating resistance broadcasts. He's alive, but the limp from his traffic accident has gotten worse since he spent 3 weeks helping coordinate emergency services without any electronic infrastructure. Final count, he says, reading from a handwritten ledger. 1,247 civilian casualties during the 4-week resistance. 89 federal agents killed or wounded. 156 local law enforcement casualties. 67 emergency services personnel killed in action. 1,500 people dead because Dallas chose independence over submission. How many would have died under federal occupation? I ask. Unknown. Elric's projections showed 340 casualties during implementation, but we don't know the long-term costs of the economic control system, the family separation protocols, the relocation programs. I think about the families who would have been split up by algorithmic utility assessments, the citizens who would have been relocated to rural exile zones, the children who would have been sent to federal optimization centers. Different casualties, I say. Deaths versus disappearances. Yeah, the building around us shows the scars of the resistance. Bullet holes in the walls from the federal raid that tried to retake the facility. Improvised repairs where local electricians restored power using equipment salvaged from federal installations. Hand-painted signs marking different departments that are slowly rebuilding Dallas municipal infrastructure. But it's working. The emergency services are coordinating through amateur radio networks and runners. The hospitals are operational using backup power and medical equipment salvaged from federal facilities. The police departments are maintaining order through community cooperation rather than electronic surveillance. Status report from the infrastructure teams, Tavin continues. Traffic management is running on manual systems with local coordination. Water and power are stable using pre-cascade equipment. Communications are functional through radio networks and landline systems. Dallas is running on 1990s technology and human cooperation. It's inefficient, it's labor-intensive, but it's independent. What about the federal response? They've established a perimeter around the Dallas metropolitan area. No federal services inside the perimeter, no federal authority, but also no federal support. We're on our own. I look out the window at the city beyond. Dallas looks different now. Fewer electronic signs, more handwritten notices. People talking to each other instead of staring at phones. Communities organizing neighborhood watches and mutual aid networks. The other cities? Houston fell to federal control after 3 days of resistance. San Antonio lasted a week. Austin is still fighting, but they're surrounded and running out of supplies. Austin, the state capital, probably the last major Texas city, still resisting federal integration. If they fall, Dallas will be completely isolated. Any word from Roran? He's in federal custody, classified as a high-value domestic terrorist. We think he's being held at a federal facility outside the Dallas perimeter. Roran, who lost his family to federal beta testing and sacrificed his freedom to shut down the economic control system. He's probably being interrogated about resistance coordination, about the technical methods we used to shut down Cascade. And Elric? Still in federal custody, but different classification. He's listed as a federal contractor on administrative leave. Apparently, he's working with federal authorities to develop improved versions of Project Cascade. I'm not surprised. Elric genuinely believed that federal control was more efficient than local democracy. He probably sees the Dallas resistance as proof that his original system wasn't comprehensive enough. What about the long term? Tavin pulls out another ledger, this one showing economic projections for Dallas operating as an independent city-state. Without federal financial integration, we're cut off from most banking systems. Local businesses are operating on barter and local currency. Unemployment is at 30% because most large employers had federal contracts that were terminated. But local manufacturing is up 200%. Food production is up 150%. Community organizations are providing services that used to be handled by federal agencies. People are working together because they have to. The city is rebuilding itself from the ground up, not through federal optimization algorithms, but through human cooperation and local knowledge. The federal government is calling it the Dallas experiment, Tavin says. They're presenting it as a controlled study of what happens when local authorities reject federal coordination. We're a laboratory? We're a warning. They're using our struggles to justify federal integration in other cities. Look what happens when you choose independence over security. Look how many people die when local authorities reject federal expertise. I think about the broadcast that started the resistance. The truth about Project Cascade that gave Dallas the choice between federal control and local democracy. The city chose democracy, and 1,500 people died defending that choice. Do you think we made the right decision? Tavin is quiet for a long moment, looking at the casualty reports. Ask me in a year. If Dallas is still independent, if the local systems are working, if people are living freely instead of being managed by federal algorithms, then maybe. And if we're not, then we'll have died free instead of lived as subjects. Through the window, I can see work crews repairing storm damage using hand tools and local materials. Federal disaster response would have been faster, more efficient, more coordinated. But it would have come with federal oversight, federal control, federal authority that would never have been withdrawn. Any word from other cities about resistance? Detroit is organizing. Phoenix is considering it. Some rural areas in Montana and Wyoming are declaring independence from federal authority. The Dallas model is spreading. The Dallas model. Local democracy defended through organized resistance to federal control. Communities choosing inefficient freedom over efficient submission. The federal response? They're calling it domestic terrorism. Anyone who coordinates resistance to federal authority is being classified as a terrorist threat. They're using the Dallas casualties to justify preemptive federal intervention in other cities. I think about families in Houston, San Antonio, Austin. Citizens who are being processed through federal optimization systems, assigned utility scores, relocated based on algorithmic assessments of their social value. We gave them a choice, I say. Every city that heard the broadcast got the same choice Dallas got. Some chose federal security. Others chose local democracy. And the ones that chose democracy are paying the same price we paid. 1,500 casualties per city. Thousands of people dying to preserve local authority against federal optimization. The mathematics of freedom versus the mathematics of control. Status of the manual override codes? Distributed to resistance groups in 47 cities. Federal authorities are trying to change the codes, but they're hard-coded into legacy military systems. Dad's electrical manual is still working. Dad's Navy manual. The technical knowledge that gave local authorities the tools to resist federal system integration. I wonder if he ever imagined that his military training would be used to defend American cities against American federal authority. What about Halen's dispatch records? They're being used as evidence of federal responsibility for the emergency services casualties. Her documentation of the lockdown protocols is part of the legal case against Project Cascade. Halen died documenting the federal systems that killed her. Her final entries are now being used to expose the systematic nature of federal infrastructure sabotage. Legal case? The Texas state government is filing suit against the federal government for unauthorized occupation of Texas cities. They're using evidence from Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, and Austin to argue that federal emergency intervention was actually federal aggression. I look at the handwritten casualty reports, the amateur radio equipment, the improvised infrastructure repairs. Dallas has been cut off from federal systems for 4 weeks, and the city is functioning. Are we winning? We're surviving. The question is whether survival is the same as winning. Through the window, I can see a neighborhood meeting in the park across the street. Citizens coordinating snow removal, organizing food distribution, planning security patrols. The kind of local cooperation that federal optimization algorithms had been designed to replace. The federal position is that we're proving their point, Tavin says. That local authorities can't maintain efficient services without federal coordination. That the casualties and inefficiencies of the Dallas model demonstrate the need for federal oversight. And our position? That efficiency isn't the only value. That local democracy is worth defending even when it's inefficient. That people have the right to choose their own government even when that choice is difficult. I think about the choice I made in the command center. The red emergency shutdown switch that would have shut down all federal systems permanently, but would have killed hospital patients dependent on federal medical networks. I could have shut it all down, I say. Eliminated federal systems entirely instead of just coordinating resistance. You chose to trust Dallas instead of choosing for Dallas. Maybe I should have chosen. Maybe fewer people would have died. Maybe more people would have died. Or maybe Dallas would have collapsed entirely without any infrastructure. We'll never know. The unknown casualties of the choice not made. The people who might have died if federal systems had been shut down permanently versus the people who did die defending local democracy. The broadcast worked, I say. The city had the information it needed to make its own choice. The city chose resistance and paid the price for that choice. I close the casualty report and look out at Dallas. The city that chose inefficient freedom over efficient submission. The city that paid 1,500 lives to maintain local democracy. The city that's still independent 4 weeks later. Final assessment? Tavin looks at his ledgers, at the casualty reports, at the infrastructure assessments. Dallas is free. Dallas is damaged. Dallas is surviving. And the federal response? They're waiting, watching, documenting our struggles to justify federal intervention in other cities. Using our casualties as evidence that local authorities can't maintain public safety without federal oversight. But we're still here. We're still here. I finish writing and close the logbook. Emergency log entry number 010, the final record of the Dallas resistance. The city that chose to save itself instead of being saved by federal algorithms. Through the window, the sun is setting over Dallas. The city lights are dimmer now, powered by local generation instead of federal grid management. But they're still on. The network stopped crumbling. The economic pressure was eliminated. The military occupation was resisted. And Dallas is still free. Halen's sacrifice wasn't in vain. The city had the tools it needed to choose its own future. End log entry number 010. Final status: Dallas remains independent. Cost: 1,247 civilian casualties, 312 emergency services casualties. Duration: 28 days of federal resistance. Outcome: bittersweet resolution, freedom preserved, heavy price paid. Personal note: for Halen, who died giving us the codes to choose our own future. Dallas chose. Dallas paid. Dallas endures.